Hey guys, welcome to Taylor Talks Comics. Today we'll be talking about EC comics and the best way to collect them. Okay, so the old classic EC comics, the best comic books of the golden age for sure. They have been collected in a number of different ways over the years. These comics, if you're not familiar, were the ones responsible for Frederick Wertham putting together on trial what would eventually lead into the comics code, because these were too gruesome. These were warping children's minds and that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that they've been collected over the years since then. They've been reprinted in single issues. They've been collected in trade paperbacks, oversized hardcovers by different companies, and that sort of thing. So these are the more modern ways they've been collected, and I'll show you the differences and that kind of thing. But a lot of great artists and writers have come from the EC comics that would go on to do better things or bigger things, or just have their entire bibliography from these comic books of, like I said, the best comic books to come out of the golden age. So these are 3 EC comic books that I've collected in collected editions to try to get a sampling for how I want to collect them. And I'll go over with you guys my thoughts and processes and the conclusions I came to, if you will. So first I want to show you this collection, because if you're wanting a sampling of EC comics, this is what I would highly recommend be your first encounter with it. And this is the Choke Gasp, the best 75 years of EC comics from the EC archives, and it's put out by Dark Horse. So these are the colored reprints. And this has a great image on the back with a bunch of the top name creators. You have Bill Gaines back here, who's been most responsible for getting these reprinted. You got Wally Wood, Jack Davis, Severin, Elder, Al Feldstein, Harvey Kurtzman, Johnny Craig, right there. And I love this image because it has all of their signatures on it in the way that they would sign their names on the stories, which we'll show you here. And then you get a blurb from Steven Spielberg. You can't get better than that. George Lucas even makes an appearance in the blurbs. R.L. Stein. So this Choke Gasp collection, you can see this is a hefty tome of books and stories. I think it runs over 500 pages. 525 plus pages of EC comics. And I think this is the best first book for anybody wanting to get an EC comics, because it's relatively inexpensive too. It's cover priced at only $50, and you can find it for cheaper than that on like InStockTrades.com. I think I found it for like $34. It's this hefty tome of EC comics. Like I said, if you're gonna get one EC comic book to kind of try to dip your toes into the EC waters to discover, this is what I'd recommend, because it's cheap. You get a huge sampling of all the different creators, huge sampling of different types of stories they tell, and it's in a nice oversized hardcover. So here's a dust jacket. One thing with these Dark Horse versions of the EC comics or the EC archives is that the dust jackets exactly match what you have on the cover, which is kind of boring if I'm being honest. But in that point, I don't know what the point of the dust jacket is. But so here you get this great end paper of this car crash, and then it's the same exact image on the back end papers. I'm not really sure who the artist is on that. This is car crash with a semi up there. And you get a quick keeping hand. Another great image there. And then here's all the people that help put the book together. And now that this is how it's separated, and it's got a great table of contents here. I got my bookmarks set in there. I'm trying to get that out of the picture there. But it's separated. This book is collected and separated by creators. So the first, you get an introduction by Grant Geisman. And then it starts off with Johnny Craig. And it has like his cool signature there for the, I guess, the chapter break. But you get Johnny Craig and tells you which stories are included from his collections. And he's not always the artist and the writer, but Johnny Craig was famous for being both a lot, but he does have different writers here. Bill Gaines and Al Feldstein there. So you get some of his stories and tell you which issues they took place in. The great thing about EC Comics too is that well, I'll tell you here in a second what kind of stories they do. But they get Reed Crandall, Jack Davis, who's one of my favorites, George Evans, Al Feldstein, Russ Heath, Graham Ingalls, Jack Kamen, Bernie Creakston, Harvey Kurtzman, who's like one of the huge godfathers of underground comics, and he also is who put together Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine would be a famous comic book that came out of the EC Comics. Joe Orlando, John Severin, Alex Toth does one story, Al Williamson, and then Wally Wood. So like I said, you get an introduction by Grant Geisman. And this book's just so well put together. I love that it has like the signature image and signature of the artist before each chapter break. You get a black and white version and then a color version. So these are colored reprints. And that's kind of a bone to pick that some EC Comics fans have. They'd rather have like the original. I don't know if they're originally issued in black and white or if they're originally issued with different colors. I can't remember. Somebody please correct me. I'm not an EC Comics expert by any means. I'm still fresh in the game. But comment below with the corrections if they were originally published in color or black and white. But I love the page numbers here. They're the page numbers of the story and then also of this collection. So it's always good to keep track of where you are. So it's all Johnny Craig. So EC Comics would have all different types of stories. They'd have collections of crime stories, collections of war stories, collections of horror stories, which The Vault of Horror is one of them. Tales of the Crypt, probably the most famous. But the war stories were called Two-Fisted Tales. Oh, there we go. And let me keep that in actually, so I know where I'm at. Two-Fisted Tales and what was the other one that Kurtzman did? I can't think of it. Let's see if it's in the Kurtzman section here. So I can try to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Oh, geez, I just bumped the camera. Frontline Combat, that's what it was. Two-Fisted Tales and Frontline Combat were the Kurtzman stories. So as you can see, there's just incredible artwork throughout this whole thing. And then here's Russ Heath, and again, color image. Here's some Russ Heath stories. Where's Jack Davis? Jack Davis is quickly becoming one of my favorite artists as I discover EC Comics. And I actually have an art print coming from him that's signed by him. He passed away a few years ago, but he did sign some of these art prints that I got. It's coming to the mail. I'll definitely show that off on an episode of Taylor Talks Comics because I can't wait to get it. But this is Jack Davis. He's, like I said, becoming one of my favorite artists to come out of EC Comics. But one of the books I'll show here in a minute has this collection. So this is Dark Horse. Dark Horse puts out colored versions of all these books. This is just a collection, like a greatest hits, if you will. And like I said, the best way to kind of get a sampling of what you want from EC Comics. But they have also, Dark Horse, I'm talking about, released the entire collection of, like they'll have a hardcover of just the Frontline Combats, or a hardcover of just the Vault of Horrors. And they'll be released in chronological order of those issues. So like each hardcover collects, I think, like 4 issues, four, 5 or 6 issues of the original comic book. Inside each issue, this is Harvey Kurtzman, one of his famous stories. Inside each issue would have like 4 or 5 strips. Again, I don't know if my numbers are accurate there. You can correct me in the comments down below. But so you get a comic book, if you're originally buying the EC Comics, you'd get 4, 5, or 6 strips from all these different artists that pertain to that theme. So you'd have Vault of Horror would be all horror comics, Frontline Comic would be all war comics, Crime and Suspense would be all crime and suspense stories. And then they also had weird science and science fiction. So they did crime, science fiction, war, horror, and then they would eventually tail off into doing Mad and Panic. So here's another Spawn of Mars, one of the more famous science fiction stories. That's it. But like I said, this is a great first collection to have. I highly recommend it, especially if you have an aversion to black and white comics, which I'm about to show you. Dark Horse does them all in color. Because Fantagraphics, who I'm about to speak about, has been putting out these collections. And these are artist-centric books. So these are standard size comic books. I don't know if I have. Here's a trade paperback. Yeah, so you can see that they're pretty much the same trim size, a little bit wider on the edge there, the same height. So they're standard size, but they're more artist-centric, so they're not chronological. Like I said, Dark Horse does the chronological releases of how the original comic book issues were released, and Fantagraphics is doing artist-centric ones. I don't know what the publishing rights are on that. If like Fantagraphics has the publishing rights to do the black and white books, or if, and then Dark Horse has color, or if Dark Horse has the chronological issues, and Fantagraphics can do art. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but they both are concurrently publishing these stories. So these are the spines. These are some fantastic spines too. They all look great on the shelf together. They've released like 20 plus of these, I think, at this point. But you can see like on the top of the spine it has like the cover image, so it matches that. And then it says Death Stand, which is the title of this collection. And then tells you which artist is collects. So this one collects Jack Davis. And then the Fantagraphics logo there. And Fantagraphics does nothing but great quality collections for all of their books. They're one of my favorite publishers by far. And the reason I actually got this book was because I wanted to collect Harvey Kurtzman stories, because he's one of the greatest cartoonists ever, one that I was not super familiar with. And he does all the writing on these stories, and Jack Davis does the artwork. So one of the byproducts of this collection was that I then discovered how much I love Jack Davis's work. But Harvey Kurtzman was famous for, when he writes a story, he does the layouts, so he'll do rough sketches of how he wants everything to be laid out, and then the artist would go over the top of it and kind of recreate that in their own work. But Death Stand here, this is all war stories by Jack Davis. Jack Davis has some other collections on through this series. I think he has a couple horror collections and maybe a sci-fi ones. I don't know if he does sci-fi or not. But these are all black and white, and I think I prefer these to the colored editions just because they feel like they fit the artwork better. The modern colors kind of, I feel like, take away from the artwork a little bit, and how great the line work was, and the sketchiness of, yeah, even the speed lines and stuff like that. I feel like you miss a lot of that when you put color over the top of it. So I think I prefer these Fantagraphics collections better. I'm going to hold on to my Choke Gas collection here, but I think the way I'll collect these from now on will be try to collect all of these Fantagraphics books. So this is Came the Dawn by Wally Wood. Wally Wood is another of the top name artists from EC Comics, one of the